I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will say that sounds great with a room full of people. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Call the roll, please.
Trustee Spurling.
Here.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Hines. Trustee Youngerman.
Yay.
Trustee Marisick.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Here.
All right, and we're all here this evening. Thank you. Item number 4 already. We have a public comment period, 2-minute opportunity for any member of the public. I suspect that we have more than one that would like to speak today, and you guys are all welcome to speak. If you come from a group and one person could present the topics from everybody, that would be helpful. But I'm also not going to restrict anybody if you did want to come up and speak. Do we have a sign-up sheet that we might be able to? Okay, perfect. So if you signed up first, if you want to come on down, and if you could just state your name just for us, even if you're already signed in.
Thanks for allowing me time this evening. I'm Karen Horn of 1210 Lindenwood in Aurora. My house is located just north of Thanksgiving Farm on the east side of Lindenwood. We moved into the house in August of 1985. At that time, we knew nothing of the water problems in this neighborhood. For several years, we have experienced everything from puddles to up to 3 inches of water in our basement after rainfall. When we arranged to refinance the house, we were told we were now considered to be on a floodplain and were required to purchase flood insurance. In 1996, we had $55,000 worth of damage to our house due to flooding. We also lost a car and had damage to another. After the flood, we spent approximately $6,000 to install drainage tile under the perimeter of our basement floor, but continued to experience water in the basement. In 2010, we spent $7,000 to upgrade the drainage tile surrounding our basement and install a second sump pit. We continued to have seepage. In 2013, we had nearly $10,000 in damage after flooding and sewer backup incident. We subsequently upgraded and replaced our sump pumps at a cost of $5,000. Because of continuous seepage and puddles in our basement, we upgraded our sump pumps and backup system at the cost of $6,400. We have done everything we can think of to keep the water out of our house, but we still found 2 inches in our basement on Sunday, the 15th of October this year. We now have 2 sump pumps running in one pit and one in a second pit with backups on both. Our plumber has repiped the 2-inch pipe rather than the 1.5 that we had. Now we are beginning to work with Thanksgiving Farm owner Eric Valle to run drainage tiles from our house to the drainage gully on his land. From there, we can only hope the water moves south the way it's supposed to. Because of the constant water problems over many years, our house has shifted and sunk. Right now, we have an estimate of $20,000 to lift our house back into position. We were thinking of trying to sell the house as is, and we were offered $65,000 by a real estate company. All of my neighbors have suffered similar issues, some much worse than ours. We are here asking again for relief. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name is Chris Hettinger. I live at 1180 Lindenwood Drive. It started out by writing, "I'm here to bring to your attention a flooding event," but I think you're aware of it by now. I've been in discussion with Mr. Chipman from Planning and Zoning since this spring. We noticed water standing behind our home after a 3-inch rain in May of this year. We've lived in this house for almost 25 years, and except for the July 1996 flood, we've never seen this amount of water in certain areas of our neighborhood. The concern I expressed to Mr. Chipman in May was the Aurora University development might cause more storm runoff than we had previously experienced. He explained to me and showed me the plans of the storm management system for the project. At that time, the project had already begun, but the area behind our homes was not yet fully developed per the plans. We waited and worried to see if it'd work. This past Monday, after the rains, I again returned to talk to Mr. Chipman to explain what had happened, the flooded yards and basements, and how this was different from the last 7-inch rain event in 2013. I said to him that the plan was tested this weekend and it failed. I asked where the village was on signing off on the project. He said there was a punch list and an as-built request into the developer and Aurora University prior to this weekend's rains, and he was waiting for those reports. I asked if this rain event and the information about how it affected the Lindenwood Drive homeowners might have an effect on the decision to sign off, and he agreed it might. I delivered over 200 photos to Mr. Chipman this past week. If any of you would like to review them, showing the amount of water, where it was coming from, and taken at different times as it rose over the weekend. Mr. Chipman has been most helpful in taking the time to explain and answer my questions. Our purpose for addressing you this evening is to make sure before the village board signs off on this project that you are fully aware of the unintended consequences of this project and ask for your help before signing off, to have Aurora University take corrective action to make sure this doesn't happen to us again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah. Hey, Dale, is there a way to turn up the microphone in the front? In there. Otherwise, if you can just speak into it kind of closely. I know it's on.
Hello, thank you for letting me speak tonight. My name is Emily Sharp, and this is Jessica Sharp. We live at 1145 Lindenwood, and just wanted to give a couple of thoughts on what we've been dealing with. In 2013, we moved in 2007. In 2013, we lost everything, a full finished basement and everything that was down there. We had no insurance coverage because we weren't told by our insurance agent that we needed to have this extra rider on our insurance to be covered for sewage backup. We had 3 feet of sewage backup in our basement. In 2017, this year again, obviously last week, we're back to it again, and we're losing quite a bit more again this year. I don't know if any of you have ever dealt with a flooded basement, but it's not just losing everything. It's dealing with mold. It's dealing with smell. We have toads in our basement right now that we're trying to get out. We're living with that, and now we also have an estimate of a $25,000 damage to our garage that is sunken into the ground in our house. Didn't have these things before. We've been trying to get out from underneath this house. It was a starter home. We weren't intending to live here forever. There's no way we're going to be able to sell this home now. I just ask for somebody's help, for your help in listening to us. I think it's really important to get in front of groups such as yours, because I'm hoping we can make a difference and get something to happen in our community so that we don't have to deal with these continuous floods.
This time we were on vacation, so we actually left Saturday morning before the rain started, and we came home on Thursday night and found out that we were full of water. So now we have so much mold and all that kind of stuff because our house was all locked up for all of those days. So we took one vacation, and it's now cost us more than we could ever afford.
Thank you.
Could I clarify a point? She made the reference to sewer backup. Was it really stormwater or was it sewer water?
It came out of the sewer.
What, which would mean it would come out of the toilet fixture or?
Came out of the toilet. Our actual sewage pipe going into the ground blew off because there was so much pressure that came in. The pipe that was going upstairs to the toilet was separated.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. And we'll comment, and staff has some comments, but I kind of wanted to wait until everybody on that topic has had an opportunity to speak. So is there anybody else on that topic or any other topic that was wishing to address the board this evening?
There's a Larry Phillips who signed up. Why don't
Okay.
we just-
Thanks, Debbie.
My name is Larry Phillips. Me and my wife live at 1160 Lindenwood Drive, which is just about the low point. We live right next to John and Chris Hettinger. And I'm not here to really say too much bad about Aurora College because it's a beautiful facility and I think it'll make a great thing for Montgomery. The reason I'm here is they have not taken care of the water runoff that has occurred. We have had water problems there. I'm not here to say they caused all the water problems because we've had water problems, but during that rain, it seemed like it came in two different phases, kind of like 4 inches, and then there was a pause, then another 4 inches is what I've heard. I went out after the first phase, and we had much more water than we would normally had in a 4-inch rain. And then another thing, it just, where before we'd had rains similar to that, and it seemed like in 2 or 3 days that the water went down and it kind of, the sump pump didn't run quite as much. This time it went on probably twice as long. And I went over and looked, and I don't know what kind of a drainage system they have. I understand it's to let out the water gradually, but I went over there and there was a lot of standing water below their pond. So what I'd like to have Montgomery do is just look at it and see if there's something that can be done. I'd say they probably didn't quite plan for the amount of water, which it seems like we had a flood that was a 1,200-year flood. Then we probably had some that, I would be 3,000 years old if I could tell you about all the rains that we've had and what is supposed to be and what we had. So, again, I'm very proud of Aurora College. I like their facility. It's beautiful, but thank you.
Thank you, Larry. All right. So at this point, and I do appreciate everybody bringing this to our attention tonight. I know our engineer, Pete Wallers, has looked at this, actually looked at a lot of drainage questions that we've received from residents in this area in 4 or 5 different areas in the village after that rain event, which is a pretty serious rain event. But I know he has a little bit of a timeline that I think Karen kind of outlined pretty accurately on the Aurora University project, which is not quite, we haven't signed off on that yet. But I'll stop talking and let Pete kind of give a little synopsis, if that's all right.
Sure, and so maybe I'll just start with the storm event that we had last week. And as I think everyone has alluded to, it was a pretty substantial rainfall, somewhere between 7.4 and 7.8 inches of rainfall in a 48-hour period. So that's pretty significant. The 48-hour, 50-year storm would be about 6.8 inches, and the 100-year 48-hour storm would be about 8.2. So we're pretty close to a 100-year event, maybe not quite there, but it's a lot of water to manage for sure. Prior to the storm, the county did notify AU that there was a concern relative to some drainage on the west property line. They also informed us, and we also notified AU as well and requested as-built topography as part of their as-built survey, which hasn't been submitted yet, so that we could check against the plans that were proposed and what was actually installed, so we can see if they've installed it properly. So that work is ongoing, and as soon as we have an answer relative to that, and as soon as we receive the topo, we'll certainly let everybody know. In general, Aurora University followed the King County Stormwater Ordinance to the letter. They provided stormwater detention for all of their new impervious area that went in. They also provided compensatory storage for the floodplain wherever they encroached on it. Something that's probably appropriate to note is that in 2014, the county commissioned a more detailed study of the area, and it's on the screen now, of the Johnson, Lindenwood, and the Aurora University site. And what you see there, this is pre-project, so this is before Aurora University did any work on the property, that there's floodplain that obviously crosses Aurora University, but also you can see that it does impact Johnson Lindenwood subdivision along the roadway there and those several houses. We would consider this what we would call best available data. So this is the flood study that we used to make sure that Aurora University, if they encroached on any of the blue area on their property, they had to provide comp storage. And that was done as part of their site plan. So that's the other element that we'll certainly check to make sure that they provided the proper compensatory storage for the project. But based on what we know right now, we believe they did proceed according to the county ordinance and to the appropriate floodplain ordinance. And the study that's shown here that was done in 2014 is not regulatory, but it is what we consider best available data, so that's the reason we used it. And we have that discretion to be able to use that information. So this would be more stringent than what actually is the regulatory floodplain. Now, Rich, if you have that, just so people can see, a little bit more difficult to see, but that's the actual area that's on the flood insurance maps. It's just a smaller area. So the point here is that we have used the best information that we had available to us, and we made sure that Aurora University compensated for anything that they filled in that area. So, but we'll, our plan, and we have been in contact with representative from the county, Jody Walnick, and we'll definitely resolve it prior to signing off on the project.
And for non-engineers in the room, the compensatory storage.
So what that means is if you have if you encroach on a floodplain, so if you fill in that area that's blue, for example, and you put 1 foot of soil in there, you have to dig an area nearby 1.5 feet in volume. So there's a 1.5 ratio to fill floodplain. So the comp storage, we call it compensatory storage, it's basically compensating for any fill that would be done. So in order to accommodate the ball fields or whatever, they may have had to slightly encroach on that floodplain, but they would have had to have provided the 1.5 times compensatory storage.
I get you. So I guess just to reiterate, if they did fill in any of those blue areas, they would have cut and created a pond for at least 50% more than that, so 150% of that volume. So if it was built per the plan, they shouldn't have been sending a greater rate of runoff this direction.
Correct. There shouldn't have been any more water than what would have normally come in a major event. Now, the ball fields, the parking lots, and the drives were all, the detention was provided for all of that at a restricted release rate of 0.1 CFS per acre. So that, again, is in accordance with the county's ordinance.
Okay.
Is the normal flow from northeast to southwest? As I look at that going from upper right or to lower left, okay.
And so if, to understand, if they encroach up there near that dark square, are they required to put their comp storage in that path?
No, it just has to be able to freely drain into that path. So
Okay.
they can, what it does, it allows you to, let's say, put a corner of a field or something like that, so that you can accommodate improvements, but you don't fill in the floodplain, so you don't, all that water doesn't get displaced somewhere else, is the key.
So if they do that, then they have to do something to generate the water, to help push the water to the comp storage.
It needs to flow by gravity, and that's the way it was set up.
Okay.
What we can do is I can get more detail for you at the next meeting after we've had time to look at, the county's concerns and the residents' concerns, and then kind of go through it in more detail. But like I say, generally, the process was to maintain all the flood storage. So, and we can overlay the improvements that Aurora University did, and you'll probably see where they had some areas where they may have encroached a little bit, but then we'll show you what the calculation was for the volume, so.
And then is there anything else that can be done to mitigate this, because I've heard this multiple times, because we have some out on the west side too, where the 50-year storm, and I heard some lady on TV down in Texas and said she'd be 3,000 years old if she had every 50-year storm that they told her about.
So I think everybody's very aware that we have climate change. And what the folks at Illinois State Water Survey believe is that the rainfall totals will go up for the 100-year storm. They're in the process right now of doing a revision to the document that we use to design detention basins. It's a publication called Bulletin 70, and it was the most recent development to determine what rainfall would be. So let me just give you an example of what has already transpired. When I started working quite a while ago, I'm not going to say how long, but quite a while ago, the 100-year rainfall was 6.2 inches in Kane County. When Bulletin 70 came through in 1989, the 100-year rainfall went to 7.58 inches. So pretty significant increase. I suspect we're going to see another significant increase when Bulletin 70 is revised again, so that we'll have to be providing higher levels of protection. But based on best available data today, the 100-year rainfall is in the county of Kane is 7.58 inches for the 24-hour storm, and as I said, for the 48-hour storm, it's 8.2, 8.16. So I can't tell you what the increase in rainfall volume may be in the future, but I would suggest that it will be greater than what we have today. And at any, there really is no such thing as a 100-year storm. It's really a storm that has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. It becomes easier to explain by using the term 100-year storm, but it's really a 1% storm. That's what we designed for. So the 100-year floodplain is a 1% floodplain, basically. So in any given year, there's a 1% chance that you can exceed that storm. And you can exceed it statistically more than, once a year. It can happen. But so I think the notion that these storm events may be getting higher intensity and higher volume is probably going to be borne out when they do the next analysis and publish data. So I think we'll see that. And as a result, right now, we're evaluating the King County Stormwater Ordinance right now for revisions, and we're certainly going to be prepared if that document is issued while we're still in the review to update the requirements at that time.
And if you currently live in one of the houses that's in that blue area, this could become regulatory at some point.
So
be
Johnson
aware.
Linwood subdivision is unincorporated. The village did not commission the floodplain study that was done, but if it was submitted to FEMA for a letter of map revision, yes, then those homes that are shown in blue would be mapped in the floodplain and would be subject then to the requirements of the floodplain ordinance.
Okay.
The county's floodplain ordinance.
All right. I did see that you had a hand up. Normally, we don't get into a question and answer, but since we're still in that, if you wanted to come to the podium, I don't mind allowing you to speak.
A question for you. Where is the outflow pipe for the retention pond in the AU?
So the outflow pipe for the AU detention basin connects to the existing field tile, which drains down to the culverts that are under the railroad track.
Where is that on that map?
Be approximate, probably right down in here, I would say.
In the floodplain.
Yeah, where the culverts are, yeah.
Okay. There's been numerous people adding water to this problem. Okay. First of all, the county said okay to bringing Gusto's and Yellow and Johnston's water down to us. You guys are dumping now more water to us, or AU is dumping now more water to us. The railroad tracks have been rebuilt back there, and they built this beautiful on one side, but they left us old 2 little culverts to get our water out of our area. Why wasn't anything done with that?
Well, the improvement that was made was to just the sidings that
But they had
serve.
they had to build a different culvert.
No, they didn't have to redo the culverts that are
Yes,
in
they
place.
did. I got pictures of it.
Well, if they did, then it's not something that I
it's
was
in there.
aware of. Okay. Well,
Sir, sir,
They left our 2 culverts there under the original tracks.
sir.
Where they built their siding, their offshoots,
Yeah.
they built a nice, beautiful 2 4-foot culverts underneath there.
Okay, so, but they didn't, what I'm saying is they didn't do any work on where the 2 existing culverts were. They did their work away from that. So they provided drainage so that it can be conveyed through, but they didn't do any work on that line.
And that's where, if that water could get through there and get through Orchid Road and the railroad tracks on Orchid Road,
So, and I understand your point. So the culverts that are under the track drain onto the property where the United Sugars project is.
right, and
It's
the
a
United,
property owned by Hinchy. That property then drains across Orchid, and we have flooding problems on the other side of Orchid in the Lacone and processed plastic area.
Right.
So there's already flooding going on downstream. So, just sending water downstream may help somebody upstream, but it also has impact downstream. We're trying to manage it so that we don't we impact as few as people as possible. So those culverts haven't been done, nothing's been done with them, but if we increase their size, then there's likely going to be more flooding downstream.
but Montgomery acquired land over by Gusto and Yellow Freight Lines to build retention ponds there.
Well, the developer built the detention basins there.
Okay. There's 140 acres back in that corner.
Can I remind you, sir, that you're here to address the village board, not the village engineer?
There's 140 acres right there. That's for sale right now. Can a retention pond be put in there? It would also take care of the problem on Elka Road.
I think somewhere on the sugar, or the property, you could construct a detention basin. But I don't know how large it would have to be, and I don't know how much it would cost to
Right, it
construct.
would take an engineer. I'm not an engineer either, but I mean, that and the sugar factory was not retaining any water at all. Their outflow pipe was wide open.
Thank you, sir.
That's not true.
Yeah.
They provided stormwater detention, so.
All right.
I can just tell you this, that every development that has happened in Montgomery since I've been here provided to the letter stormwater detention in accordance with whatever ordinance was in place at the time, and most of the time to a higher standard than was required. So there was subdivisions on the west of Orchard that were built to a 0.1 release rate prior to that being a countywide adoption. And so we've been pretty adamant that every development is going to be providing stormwater detention. I don't believe there's ever been one that hasn't provided what they were needed to provide.
Awesome. And thank you. The one comment that I would make is, I think you turned mine up all the way, is that, I was going to say that I understand your concern, and to be clear, I don't fully understand it because I don't have, a foot of water in my own basement. But what I can convey to you is that we understand that this is a serious issue for you. It's also important for us. We had, I think, 5 or 6 different, I guess not issues, but areas of town that have flooded. This is an area of town that historically has had some drainage issues that we've really been working a lot on over the last 15, 20 years. Before my time here, I'm sorry, ma'am, not in this specific area, but the entire west side of town. And so you have the attention of the village engineer, Kane County Stormwater Department, and I got an email today from Dr. Sherrick at AU saying that she is very agreeable and looking for a solution on this. So they're willing to work to solve this problem, to see whether or not their development or how it was graded or whatnot created any issue or made it worse. So coming to a solution here, or at least figuring out what they did and where we can go from here, is a priority. So I do want to convey that to you. If there's any other members of the board that have any comments or questions, if anybody's here and would like an update on the situation, if you provide an email on a sign-up sheet or something, we can email you any updates that we have. Otherwise, we will likely talk about this at a future meeting. I don't know if it'll be the next meeting, but once we have some actual information to report, we can get back to you. Denny.
Just before we close this, I got a couple of questions for everybody. How many people are here from the Linwood subdivision? So almost everybody.
Does everybody live in one of those blue houses in one of the... Okay, that's good to know.
Where are you from, ma'am?
Okay.
Okay. In a way, to those people, you're there by yourself. To those people, Jessica mentioned that she had sewage. Other people, I think, just mentioned there's a lot of water in their yards or in their basements that flooded in from around their houses. How many, it'd be 2 questions. How many just had sewage? Okay. And how many people had just water come in the sides and the majority that way? Okay. Yeah. I've had that problem too at the one house I had. I had a creek run right underneath it. I didn't know it when I bought it. It had some pump in it. Did like the old owner did. I pumped it in the backyard, and then I realized all I'm doing is, that's where the river was. It was coming right back in the house. So I made it go to the front, to the street and out, and then sold the house. But the second guy was happy because I put all the money into it. But it is a problem a lot of times on just the seepage in. And so I want to know how many just had sewer problems, because that's probably a different problem than plain water. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board on this?
Should we report this sewage issue to Metro West? Is that the service agency?
Well,
That would be Fox Metro.
Fox Metro, I'm sorry, yes.
yeah,
I think
that's,
we could, and I actually have a meeting with Fox Metro staff on Wednesday, so I'll definitely bring it to their attention, but that definitely needs to be looked at, for sure.
Okay. Awesome. And then did you want to address the board on Lakewood Creek? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's everybody for this situation? Okay.
Right.
And then afterwards, if everybody sticks around, we will have our audit presentation, which I know would be very exciting. So Lakewood Creek West. Go ahead.
So, if you may recall, in 2013, at Lakewood Creek West, which is along the best way to, we don't have mapping for that this evening, but for a future meeting, I'll bring the studies that were done. But it's near the Commonwealth Edison line on the west side of Stewart Sports Complex. There's a culvert that crosses. There's a Commonwealth Edison easement. And in 2013, we had significant standing water along that easement. And as you may recall, we did an analysis at that time. And if my memory serves, I believe we had about a 5.5-inch rainfall in 2013 in 24 hours. The first, there were three options that were discussed. The first option was to allow for more bypass through the detention basins. So we removed restrictors from the Troon Basin and then the several other basins that are downstream as first stage. And based on our review with this new rainfall, we believe it did have a significant improvement, even though there still was standing water, obviously, in the easement. And I know that several, I don't have an exact count of the homes that were affected, but I know there was multiple homes, and I know that there was some flooding through window wells as well. I just don't have all that detail, and really Todd, the Director of Public Works, has that information. I just need, he's been out at a seminar, so I haven't gotten it. Anyway, what we'd like to do is just review it further, because we did propose some additional work that could be done to mitigate the stormwater impact in that area. And at the time we looked at in 2013, there was no funding source for that work. And it's probably appropriate to revisit that report and decide how you might want us to proceed.
Yeah, so for the record, the question was, what as a homeowner could they do? And the one thing that I would encourage people is, if you flooded this time, is to make staff aware of that. And pardon me if I missed that, but
Yeah, that would be super important. And the other thing is, it's very important for us to know if you got water that your sump pump couldn't keep up, or whether there was like water coming in the window wells, how exactly the water got into your basement. Through the foundation, okay. So that kind of information is helpful. Okay, so, and if the village has the addresses of everybody that had water problems, that would be very helpful. So if your neighbors have them, they could do that, that would be.
What would
Ma'am?
be the best address to direct that information to?
call Public Works. Todd, probably.
Is there a generic email or?
Or, just contact the village general. We just need to have it recorded and then passed along, however is most convenient. You can call Village Hall and let them know. Okay. Okay, well, if everyone's reported it, then that's a good start. That's very important.
Ma'am, we are going to talk about this. I had asked Engineer Wallers and our village administrator to put it on the agenda for this week, but it's been postponed because our village administrator and our public works director are at a meeting. We will be discussing this at a meeting in 2 weeks, which gives the engineer, our village engineer in Public Works, a little bit more time to come up with an effective solution. But you're more than welcome to come back. I'll update you when the meeting is, and we'll have that conversation.
So the update that we got from our Public Works Director on this is that 9 homeowners called the village. So if that's the extent of the folks that actually had water entering their basement, that's good. We need to know that data. Pardon me if you'd mentioned this, but I know that IDOT is studying, has a drainage study for this area on Route 30 that they've, actually IDOT's consultant, that they've submitted, and IDOT hasn't released that to us yet. That might be the only hang-up in discussing it in 2 weeks, because if they're looking at the situation, it might be helpful to see what they're proposing as well. But again, this was a rather significant rain event, and we made some improvements last time this happened on Bryan Lane, which is, I guess, a different drainage situation from the other one. But again, it's something that we're working on, and we'll talk about it at a future meeting. Any other comments from anybody on that? Okay. All right. Thank you all for coming. You're welcome to stay, as I mentioned, or you can leave and we won't be offended. No problem. And we will update you if you give us your information before we talk about it again. I forgot my... Can you... I'll take just a second here. Hoping that was.
Yeah.
Carol, yes. Thanks for stopping by.
Make sure you're reading your newsletter.
All right, so we'll move on to the audit presentation. At this time, I'd turn it over to our Director of Finance, Justin Van Voren, for an introduction.
Thank you, President Brawley. Tonight, in front of the board is the audit for the fiscal year ended April 30th, 2017. At this time, I will turn it over to Jamie Wilkie. She is a partner with Lauterbach and Amon, our auditors, and she'll present the audit to the board.
Thank you. I see everyone cleared the room for the audit discussion. So this evening, as Justin mentioned, we do have the presentation of the comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ended April 30th. That is the large bound document I see in front of everyone. So if you have that handy, I will provide just a few page number references this evening. I'd like to first start out by thanking Justin and his team. They do an outstanding job preparing for the audit. This is an annual audit. We start in the month of April, so it is about a 6-month process from start to finish, so fairly intensive back and forth with staff. We start with planning phase, going into our testing phase, drafting of the financial statements and review of those with staff, and then obviously this evening the final submission and approval of those final financial statements. That process over 6 months certainly does not happen without coordinated effort from staff. So I wanted to thank Justin and his team. They do an excellent job preparing for the process. We had just a couple of minor adjustments this year, so really an outstanding preparation on behalf of the team. So thank you. I also want to point out the last item of the introductory section, which should provide a copy of the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. This is the highest level reporting we can have for units of government. It is a third-party independent review of the financial statements, again, on an annual basis. And again, there are some additional sections within the annual financial report that staff is required to prepare for that submission, so I just wanted to thank them again for their efforts. That is really looked highly upon by your bond rating agencies and other institutions that use the village's financial statements. So just wanted to point that out. We will again be submitting this year's audit for that award program. The audit opinion itself is found on page 1 and 2 of the document. Being that we had no issues, no internal control issues this evening, we obviously have a clean audit opinion. What we call an unmodified opinion, that is the highest level we are able to issue. The financial statements as presented are indicated by being materially correct, and that is the indication of a clean audit opinion. I do want to point out a very important section from the board's perspective, and that is immediately after the audit opinion. You should see a divider page labeled Management's Discussion and Analysis. There are 14 pages provided within this section of the report, indicated by MD&A 1 through 14 at the bottom of the page, so it's got kind of special page numbering. This is what we consider to be the executive summary to the audit. It is a very large document. I know there are a lot of numbers and disclosures. The management discussion and analysis section is in fact prepared by management, so it is really intended from Justin's perspective to be the high-level overview for the fiscal year. You'll see discussions on trend information, both revenues and expenditures, capital asset investments during the year, long-term debt activity, discussion on the local economy and how we think those future changes may impact financial statements. So really nice, concise 14-page executive summary that Justin's provided to the report. I just want to point out at a very high level the results for the general fund for the fiscal year. So we're going to flip to page 70, about halfway through the document. The general fund ended the fiscal year with an increase in fund balance of about $26,000. I just wanted to note for the board that that is well within the fund balance reserve policy requirements. So that leaves the general fund at the end of the year with about a 41% reserve, okay? So again, a slight increase for the year and a 41% reserve on page 70, okay? The last section I want to point out starts on page 137, and this is a section that is required for the Certificate of Achievement program. So page 137 begins what we call our statistical section. From the board's perspective, there's really a wealth of information at the back of the report starting on page 137. The first several schedules will focus on financial trends for the last 10 years. You'll go through property tax information over the last 10 years, long-term debt activity, operating indicators, et cetera. So that will actually take you all the way through the end of the report. And I always think from the board's perspective, really a lot of good, useful historical information that you can find within one kind of easy document. I did want to point out again, no internal control related issues, so no new management letter recommendations as far as improvements to processes, et cetera. We'll be working with Justin over the next fiscal year to address a Governmental Accounting Standards Board reporting requirement with regards to post-retirement healthcare costs. So we could certainly spend many, many hours discussing that lengthy GASB topic, but just know we'll be working with Justin over the coming year to address any potential liability that the village might have with regards to that topic. I would certainly be happy to answer any questions that the board might have this evening. Again, a very clean audit process this year.
Awesome. Any questions?
Can I get mine in English?
I'm sorry.
It's kind of like for the non-engineers in the room.
I get to the back and I'm like, wow, 166 pages. I'm very sorry. Unfortunately, it's kind of where our Governmental Accounting Standards Board has been going over the last decade. Audits seem to be getting much longer, not shorter. So I don't see that trend changing, unfortunately.
Doug, I would suggest MD&A page 1 and MD&A page 2, and that will...
Right. And that's really the intention of those 14 pages, is to try to kind of break down the technicality of the report.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you so much.
appreciate the
Appreciate it.
opportunity to present this evening.
was a wonderfully concise report. Thank you.
All right, we have two items on for consent this evening. I'll read them and entertain a motion for approval. Minutes of the village board meeting of October 9th and accounts payable through October 19th.
So moved.
Second?
I'm not sure who made the motions, I'm sorry. Okay.
Second.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yay.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Hines.
That carries 6-0. Thank you. Items for separate action. The first two, I guess if there's no new information or questions, we won't discuss them, but staff is prepared to, I think. Ordinance 1782, granting a special use for the archery place at 1725 Crescent Lake Drive.
This was an item reviewed at your last meeting as technically the first reading and recommended for approval by the Plan Commission and staff for a portion of this building at 1725 Crescent Lake Drive to be used for an indoor archery range. And review of the parking situation had indicated some additional information at the meeting last time that was updated in the Plan Commission report that there's adequate parking either on-site or adjacent with the adjacent property owners, so that is a non-issue. So staff and the Plan Commission are recommending approval.
If you recall, we discussed this.
This isn't first reading.
It's
We're
not
actually
first
voting
reading.
tonight.
Yeah, it's second reading. So we did talk about this at the last meeting, and because Trustee Hines and Lee were not here, I didn't place it on consent. So with that, this is second reading, and we'd look to approve that this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Call the roll.
Trustee Spurling. Didn't you make the motion?
Steve did. I second. Sorry.
Trustee Youngerman.
I've been called a lot of things, but never Trustee Spurling. Yes.
I'm better looking.
That's right.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Hines.
What are we voting on? I wasn't here.
The archery place.
Oh, okay. I agree, yes.
Thank you, sir. All right, that carries 6-0. Item B is the ordinance amending section 13 of the zoning ordinance regarding parking requirements. Yeah, this isn't related to the other one. This is also intended to be second reading. We talked about it at the last meeting. If staff or anybody has anything addition, go ahead, Rich.
There's really not much to add. What this was a consolidation of our parking regulations as we looked at industry standards. Since the last time, the code was in need of an update, and some additional uses listed that had not been listed previously to help us determine what parking demand should be incorporated into plans for special use items and general retail and industrial areas. So again, the Plan Commission recommended approval, as does the village staff. And so we'd ask that you approve this amendment to the parking regulations for the zoning ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Hines. Trustee Youngerman.
Yeah.
And that carries 6-0. Thank you. And then ordinance, or item C, ordinance 1784, renaming a certain street. This is waiver first and passage on the second.
Probably. So the county has been doing a review of all of the named streets in the county and comparing them to the original plats. And there's several communities that have had to address some of these inconsistencies. Well, in Montgomery, there's a section of roadway that we've referred to as Raymond Drive. There's an exhibit in your packet that shows it. It was technically platted as State Street when the plat was originally filed in 1946. but it has been referred to as Raymond Drive ever since. It's never been referred to as State Street. So this ordinance will just officially rename it to Raymond Drive instead of State Street.
So moved.
There's been a
Second.
motion. Is there, okay, 1 second, we'll have discussion. Nobody's address is changing.
Correct.
So,
Key. I mean, we're trying to maintain the addresses of all the properties, so there's nobody's affected. The people that front that front State Street, their address is Raymond Drive.
okay.
So if we don't change it, they're gonna have to change their mailing address.
So if they,
Don't wanna do that.
so if they live in one of those houses and they missed this meeting, they'll never know. Okay. Any other discussion or sarcasm? Okay. Call the roll.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Hines. And Trustee Youngerman.
Yay.
Carries 6-0. Thank you. Item 7, items for discussion. Nothing. Item 8, new or unfinished business.
I would just like to pass along to, although Administrator Zolfo and Todd aren't here, Director of Public Works, the update on the vehicles and the auctioning of the vehicles was much appreciated to keep us up to date on that. So I really appreciated that in the updates.
I would just like to say I was at the Recycle event Saturday, and they had first 3 hours, you had 340 TVs, and that was only about 11:15 when I left. And there was a lot of people there. They were not standing in line, but there was a good steady stream before me and after me, and we had a lot of our guys working there too, as well as DC people, as well as the owner of DC, and everything was going really smooth. So just wanted to say that was a great event.
Another trash-related topic, several people expressed pleasure to me that they don't have to wait for an annual pickup day to discard some of the flood-damaged material in their homes. All they had to do was take it to the curb.
Awesome. The one thing that I would note, this past week, Jeff and I went to the Transform Illinois Coalition Fall Conference, where Montgomery, Oswego, and Yorkville won the municipal award for this year on our essentially working together. Apparently that's more rare than you might think, and they wanted to highlight that, and also the joint water study that we worked on. So that's it. Anything else?
Just mention, put it out there, Halloween safety event is Sunday over at the police station. It's growing by leaps and bounds each year, and bring the kids out. It's a great time.
I have a question. In this financial report that we get, I noticed in the upper left, there's a picture of a building that I don't recognize.
The library.
That's why I don't recognize it. Okay. Never
Teach them
mind.
to read and they eat the books.
I always go in there. I never look at the building. Okay.
Thank you for the report.
That kind of reminds me of college, too, by the way.
All right, I'm going to have to cut it off there. Plan Commission, November 2nd. Our next village board meeting is November 13th in this room. Here, I was getting all excited. Executive session. All right. At this point, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss litigation where the Village of Montgomery finds that such action is probable or imminent.
So moved.
Call the roll, please.
Yo. Oh, roll. Yo.
I'm sorry, who made the motion? Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee. Trustee Hines.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Trustee Youngerman, Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
All right, 6-0, thank you.